Hi friends! Welcome to my very first video of 2023. Happy New Year! I hope you had a wonderful one. Today I am going to be talking about sari singles. I had this as a request in the comments of one of my posts at some point last year, and better late than never. This year I want to focus not just on doing individual style tutorials, but also some longer form videos where I talk more in depth on specific topics rather than certain wraps. So if there's anything that you are interested in seeing me explore, leave it in the comments and I would be happy to take those suggestions into account. So sari singles, what are they? Sari singles are something sold by Rapunzel, and what they are is essentially reclaimed strips of sari material. So they tend to be about the length of a normal scarf that you would use for wrapping, but obviously much, much thinner. So some of them will have patterns that come and go as they move down. Some of them are solid basically the entire way through. And it's always a little bit of a random selection. They group them on their website by color, but you never know exactly what it is that you're going to get. And so as a beginning wrapper, I bought a lot of these. I think a lot of us do when we're first starting out because it's, you see the sari sashes and the harmony scarves that are the many strips all sewn together, and they're really beautiful and they're very versatile. But they're also a little bit more on the expensive side, which is understandable given the amount of work that they take to make, but these are extremely affordable. You get a pack of 2 for, I'm not sure exactly what it is now, but I think at the time I bought them, it was less than $10 for a pack of 2. And then you get a hold of them and you're not entirely sure what to do. So I wanted to make this video and I wanted to show you 5 different ways that I personally use sari singles. So talking a little bit about my selection process, someone else asked me to talk through my thought process in selecting the pairing of scarves and sashes that I use. And so I will say that in general, if I am wearing a solid color top, a solid color dress, then I will usually wear a patterned tichel, and the reverse. If I am wearing a patterned top or dress, then I will select a solid color. And the reasons that I do this are a couple. First of all, I am not in general a fan of wearing multiple patterns together. I have seen people do it the maximalist style and it can look really, really incredible. But that's just in general a little bit bolder than I feel like being. And the other reason is that it eliminates the need for a perfect match. If you are wearing solid with solid and you're trying to hit the same color, it can be really obvious when things aren't exactly there and it can look not as put together. So you can see here I have this burgundy background and I have this dark red Sparkalicious that is not quite the same. It's a little bit darker, a little bit, not as warm toned necessarily, a little bit cooler toned, but I think they look fine together because you also have these other colors. I'll put an insert here of me selecting a few different sari singles that I think can work with this dress. So this is the dress that I'm wearing, and you can see that I've picked a few different sari singles that match different aspects of my dress. So here I have this neutral cream that picks up the purple in this little floral motif. And then here I have the olive one to pick up the color that is in the leaves. And then this is a yellow, sort of pale goldy color that picks up some of the more golden tones in the flowers. So that is how I selected these 3. So those are the 3 sari singles that I'm going to be working with in this video. Not all at the same time for every wrap that I'm doing, but that is a little window into my selection process. So something else about the sari singles that can take a little bit of getting used to is that they are all slightly different materials. Some of them I think are silk, some of them I think are polyester, some blend thereof. But even the content of the material, if it's the same, the weave can be really, really different, and the texture can be extremely different from one to the other. And so some of them are a little bit more, have more mechanical stretch to them, by which I mean the fabric itself isn't stretchy. There's no, spandex or anything in here that stretches, but because of the way that the fabric is woven, you can pull it a little bit one direction or the other and it'll stretch. And so the more mechanical stretch that one of these has, the more versatility you're going to have with it. So as an example, I have this one, which is a pretty solid material and it doesn't really want to give me a whole lot of stretch. And so if I try to put it on my head at an angle, I get ripples like this. It doesn't necessarily want to go on at an angle, and sometimes you'll have a little bit more success turning a strip one way or turning it the other way, trying it going straight across, trying it going at a diagonal. But it might take a little bit of fussing before you figure out what is and isn't going to work with any one strip. So those being the basics, I can start getting into what I actually do with them. So the first style that I'm going to show is basically just, I have here just a regal wrap with my Sparklelicious, and I am just going to use this as a headband, essentially. So I like to do this, and also if you're a person that wears half wraps, this works beautifully as a half wrap over a velvet headband. So I want this patterned bit to finish on the top here. So I'm gonna scooch it a little bit more in one direction and put it on nice and wide, parallel to the front, and tie it in a knot. So now I have one end that is quite long and the other quite short. Remember, this is about the same length as any other scarf. And so I'm going to bring this up and around one more time and more or less just keep it layered on top of exactly where it was. And so now I'm going to take both my ends, bring them up, and you can finish it in a couple of different ways. If you want, you can just kind of bring these ends back and tuck them in, and that is an option. I like to add a little bit of interest by tying a knot. You could tie this in a knot and finish it in a bow, just like so. And obviously, figure out how to even that up if you were going to wear it that way, which I think looks really pretty. Or if you don't want to have the ends out like that, you can simply tie it in a second knot here and tuck your ends back in. And it gives a really tidy but interesting look. So this is what it looks like from either side. Got a little bit sticking out there. Just tuck that back under. And from this side. So that is my first look. That is probably the most basic. If you want, I could also have tied this on. So with a regal wrap, you bring up one side up and over and then the other side up and over. You could put this on after you've brought your first side up. And then when you bring your second side, you can cover this strip in the back. So something that I noticed with these, so they have this machine finished edge. It's called a serged edge if you're not super familiar with sewing terms. And so the threads are going to be visible. If you want, afterwards, you can go around and just gently tuck them underneath if you don't like that raw edge sewing. It doesn't really bother me, so I don't tend to do that. But if you prefer a slightly more finished look, that is one way to achieve it. So now I'm going to undo my knot. You can see it's very secure. It's taking me just a second. And I will show you another way that I wear it that is essentially just, there we go, that can be worn really as an add-on to a simple wrap on the bottom. And so this time, I am going to put the scarf behind my head evenly, and I'm going to bring it up turban style. And so you can let these wrinkle up a little bit on either side, gather just a little bit, and then as if I were tying a turban, I'm going to cross them over each other once, and then again, and then bring them back down. And then same thing, bring this up, cross them over once, twice, and tuck them back underneath themselves. And so you end up with a nice little, almost like a double bow effect, sort of like with those turban headbands, just like that. Here's what it looks like from the side and from the other side. So this I think would be especially striking with one of the sashes, one of the sari singles that is, the entire thing is a solid color. So those are a couple of my favorite ways to wear it, just like over top of any simple regal wrap. So for my next one, and I think that this is more or less what I did in the, what I called my home run wrap. So I'm going to take down one of the sides of my regal wrap. And I'm going to use the same sari single and try to put it on my head nice and evenly so that I finish with my tails nice and even over here. And that needs to come just a little bit more this way. That looks good. And now I'm going to braid it in with my tail of my regal wrap. So just keep braiding all the way down with the two ends of my sari single and the one end of my wrap. And as always, I always say, the tighter you braid, the shorter this is going to wrap. So I am going to try and keep it relatively loose because, especially with the Sparklicious scarves, they tend to wrap a little bit shorter than others, I find. Okay, and so now I've gotten to my very end here, and I'm going to bring this guy up and around. And so I think for when I did the home run wrap, I left my tail out, but that was a slightly longer scarf. So for this one, I am just going to tuck it in right here at the base of my neck. And that's it. So I do still have some fringes hanging out. Again, if I were wearing it out like this, I would clean it up a little bit at this point. But this is the look. I think this is very similar to the home run wrap, although I think I also, for my home run wrap, did a V at the front here. So from the side and all the way around to the other side. So now I'm going to get into a little bit more complex. So for my next wrap, I am going to be doing a variation on a style that Rapunzel posted years and years ago called the Kallah's trick. So if you are unfamiliar, a Kallah is a bride in Jewish culture, and so the idea is that this is something that is very simple for any beginner to do, but looks much more elaborate than it actually is. So for this, I am going to redo my wrap very slightly. So instead of having my scarf placed on my head very evenly, I am going to begin essentially as though I were doing shearer tails. This way. Because I want my long end to end up on this side. And I'm going to go ahead and angle it as well. You know how much I love to have an interplay in between angles from one side to the other. All right, so I've got a short end over here, and then by the time I bring my long end up and over, it is going to be pretty close in length, and they're both going to stay on this side, so I am not super concerned with making them perfectly even. So I'm going to bring them over, and I am just going to tie this in a knot for right now, but I will eventually be undoing that knot. So in the Kallah's trick video, they recommended doing this with something that is shorter than a standard scarf length or the length of these. And it is, if you do it the way on that video, you do need something that's a little bit shorter, but it's really easily modified to do it with something that is like full scarf length. So that is what I'm going to do here. So very similar, I want this end to be about the same length as my scarf ends over here. And I'm going to put this on and tie it, just because these do tend to slide a little bit more than a normal scarf would. All right, so all I'm going to do now is similarly bring this back up and over. And this is if you want to show off any particular portion of your sari single, you can play around to get that where you want it. And so now I have all of my scarf ends over here. And so this is where I'm going to undo this knot and have both of these ends hanging free, because I'm going to take these two sash ends, cross them over, and use them to tie off right here. Just like that. And I think I might have just ripped it. I did. So, you know, be gentle, because apparently you can pull too hard on these. But that's okay. This is still going to be perfectly usable, and honestly, so that's about as much length I had. All I'm gonna do is wrap this around a couple times so that you don't really see the portion that's damaged. And all I need to do is rehem this and it'll be totally fine. So that's all we do. Just tie that off. And this is the Kallah's trick. So we have this explosion of tails over here that look absolutely beautiful. And you see how quick and simple that whole wrap was, even with my little mistakes. So here it is from the side. And back. And the other side. So that was super fun. Let's not do that again. I'm gonna go ahead and undo this, and I am going to move on to my fifth and final wrap with my sari singles here. So be very gentle when I am undoing this, because I don't want to make this any worse. There it goes. Okay. So for my final style, I am going to be replicating a wrap that I saw over on Olivia's Instagram. And I don't remember if she had a name for it, but I am going to call it the zig-zag sari single braid, because that's essentially what it was using 3 different sari singles to do a zigzag and then create a braid. So I am going to be starting, I believe as she did, with one of my sari singles on the bottom. And so I am going to see if this green wants to cooperate at the front of my head. And I want this to go on nice and evenly. Woo, pretty much perfect first time around. Excellent. And I am going to tie that at the back of my head. So I actually, in this case, would not be terribly concerned about any puckering back here, just because we are about to cover it up with the full scarf that is going on over top of it. So once again, I want this nice and centered, just the way that I would if we were doing a zigzag crisscross. And I am going to put it on at the opposing angle, just like so, and I'm going to tie it underneath. Okay, and bring both sides over to here. Just adjust that a tiny bit. And on I will go with my next scarf, my next sari single. So here's that pretty golden color one that I have, and we are also going to put it on nice and evenly and at an angle. So yeah, you see this one is wanting to ripple in the back, but that doesn't matter so much. So we are just going to tie it and let it hang out over here. So now I am going to come up zigzag crisscross style with the shorter end of my Sparklicious. And that is because I want my last end to be the longest one so that I am able to get maximum coverage. A little bit of time folding in my raw edges. And up and over we go. And because this is a little bit short, I am just going to tuck it in at the base of my neck. And not worry too much about that because I'm going in with my final sari single. There we go, and I can use that to help cover whatever it is that I've got going on here. Just pull it back, and between this and my final edge coming up, should be able to keep that nice and covered. All right, have all those over here and coming up and over with my final one. And so this one, I am going to try and get maximum coverage on this side, cover up all that sari on the one side of my head, and even over here, make sure that I get all of that. Beautiful. And tuck it, little too short to tuck into the pocket. So back of the neck, there we go. Just up and underneath. Okay, so there we go. A little bit of a zigzag right here. And so now I have all of these ends over here. So I strongly suspect that if you wanted to, you could do two different braids. I am just going to gather them into one. So I've got both edges of this color, both edges of this color, and both of my green, and I am just going to start braiding. And you can braid as tightly or as loosely as you like. Because these are very thin, you could get a really, really tight braid, but then it might not be long enough to come up and over. So do be mindful of that. Just gonna keep braiding down and down and down. And this also helps to conceal the damage that I just caused. You can see a little bit right there, but overall, it is not actually that bad. And then I am starting to get to the end here. You can see where I have a little bit of unevenness, but that's okay. And then this guy is gonna come up and over just like that. And once again, I am just going to tuck this up and under because you could absolutely leave your tails out, but I think that there is plenty interesting going on with this wrap that we do not need the extra design elements. So there you go. So there it is, the zigzag sari single braid. I thought that this was such a clever idea. When Olivia did this, you could really get so creative, pulling the colors out in whatever outfit you have. So here it is from the front, from the side, back, and the other side. So there it is, 5 different ways that you can wear your sari singles, and a little bit of bonus as to how I pick out my scarves with my outfits. I hope you enjoyed this so much. That's a wrap for me. Thank you so much for watching.